I took the fall for my sister's $3,200 mistake at work. 3 years later, when she harassed me until I finally told the truth, she had me fired, evicted, and placed under conservatorship, then texted me about learning financial responsibility with a shrug emoji. I never responded. I just made sure that the next time she came across my name, she'd stop everything and pray for mercy. Me and my sister Isabella were like the sun and the moon, but in the worst way possible. When we were kids, she'd get straight A's while I got B's, and my parents would ask why I couldn't be more like her. By senior year, the divide was pretty established. Isabella had just landed this amazing marketing internship at some fancy firm downtown. My parents literally threw her a party. When I got into art school a month later, my dad asked if I'd considered something more stable, like Isabella's doing. 3 weeks into her internship, Isabella showed up in my room at 2 in the morning, and I knew something was wrong because she never came to my side of the house. Her mascara was everywhere, and she was doing that hiccup crying thing. I messed up, she kept saying. I messed up so bad. Turns out she'd maxed out mom's emergency credit card buying work clothes. $3,200. I almost choked when she said the number. Everyone there dresses like they walked out of Vogue, she said, grabbing my hands. I didn't know. I just wanted to fit in. Grace, you have to help me. I remember staring at her, not getting it. Just tell mom the truth. She'll understand, I responded. Isabella actually laughed, but it was bitter. Are you kidding? She'll make me quit. She'll say I'm not ready for the real world. Then she said the thing that got me. You have to say it was you. Mom already thinks you waste money on your goth clothes. She'll believe it. And she won't punish you as hard because she didn't finish, but I knew what she meant. Because mom already expected me to screw up. So I did it. I took the fall. The next morning when mom found the charges, Isabella was conveniently at her internship. I sat there while mom cut up the credit card, lecturing me about gothic accessories not making you special. I got a job at a coffee shop the next day, then added nights at a gas station. My life became flooded with 50-hour work weeks and calculus homework. Meanwhile, Isabella would come home gushing about client dinners, wearing her new designer clothes that I was paying for. The worst part was how much she'd changed. After she got promoted to junior coordinator, she'd make these comments. This whole thing was probably good for you, Grace. Finally learning financial responsibility. When I asked about her paying me back after 6 months, she actually said I should thank her for the life lesson. Fast forward 3 years. Our whole extended family was at Thanksgiving, and I just mentioned taking out loans for grad school. Isabella's eyes lit up with that familiar predatory gleam. She launched into a speech about financial responsibility, loud enough for everyone to hear. The whole table was listening as she painted a picture of my supposed $3,200 gothic shopping spree, how mom and dad had to teach me a hard lesson, how I'd worked all those awful hours to pay back my irresponsible debt. Something in me just snapped. 3 years of keeping quiet, 3 years of being the family disappointment while she played the perfect daughter in clothes I'd paid for. Actually, I heard myself say, since we're sharing financial wisdom, why don't you tell everyone what that money really bought? The table went silent. Isabella's smile froze as I pulled out my phone, explaining how working retail taught me to keep receipts. I listed every designer purchase, the Diane von Furstenberg dress, the Jimmy Choo heels, the entire professional wardrobe she was so proud of, all purchased May 15th, 2019, 3 weeks into her internship. The room stayed quiet as I explained the real story, how she'd begged me to take the fall, how I'd worked 50 hours a week my senior year, missing my own art show to cover shifts, falling asleep at graduation from exhaustion, all while she got promoted wearing clothes I'd paid for. Mom's fork clattered onto her plate. Isabella opened and closed her mouth like a fish, trying to form words. When she finally managed to stammer something about me needing to learn a lesson, I lost it completely. I told everyone about the constant sleep deprivation, doing homework at gas stations, watching my sister climb the corporate ladder in heels bought with my minimum wage paychecks. Uncle Richard, who toasted Isabella an hour earlier as the successful niece, sat frozen. Aunt Martha stared at Isabella like she was seeing her for the first time. The golden child image was crumbling in real time. My God, Mom whispered, staring at Isabella. We punished Grace for months. We made her pay back every penny while you, her voice broke. I stared at my parents who both had tears in their eyes and scoffed. Too little, too late. The next morning, I woke up to 47 missed calls. My art school acceptance had been withdrawn due to an anonymous tip about academic dishonesty. My phone buzzed again, then again. I grabbed it with shaking hands, scrolling through the notifications, art school admissions, my portfolio advisor, the dean's office, each message more urgent than the last. I stumbled out of bed, nearly tripping over yesterday's clothes. My hands trembled as I dialed the admissions office. The hold music felt like it was mocking me. 7 minutes of cheerful piano while my future crumbled. The admissions officer's voice was carefully neutral when she finally answered. Someone had sent them evidence that I'd plagiarized my portfolio pieces, screenshots from my Instagram, edited to show earlier timestamps than my submitted work. They'd received everything at 6:47 a.m., complete with a detailed analysis of how I'd supposedly stolen designs from various artists. My phone vibrated mid-call. A text from Isabella popped up on the screen. My stomach dropped as I read it. She'd written about financial responsibility and protecting my work, about password protection for cloud storage. The shrug emoji at the end made my blood boil. But when I tried to screenshot her confession, my screen went black, then flickered back on, then black again. I remembered that night in 2019, Isabella borrowing my phone to call mom when hers died. She'd had it for 20 minutes, said she needed to check something for work too. I'd been too exhausted from my double shifts to think about it. The admissions officer was still talking, explaining their review process when mom's call came through. I hung up on the school and answered, already knowing what was coming. Mom launched into her attack before I could speak. How dare I humiliate Isabella at Thanksgiving? After everything our family had done for me, Isabella had called her crying this morning, devastated by my cruelty. I needed to apologize immediately. I tried explaining about the art school, about Isabella's text, but mom cut me off. This was just like me, she said, always making everything about myself, always playing the victim. After she hung up, I raced to my laptop. My hands shook as I typed my Google password. Invalid. I tried again. Invalid. Password reset. The recovery email had been changed. The security questions too. When had I given Isabella access to fix my account security? Right after the credit card incident. She'd insisted on helping me set up two-factor authentication. The doorbell rang downstairs. Through my window, I watched Isabella's car pull into our parents' driveway. She got out carrying a tray of coffee and a pink bakery box, playing the perfect daughter while my life fell apart. My phone rang. My manager from the coffee shop, voice tight with barely controlled anger. Someone had filed a complaint about me stealing tips. Anonymous, of course, but very detailed. They knew about specific shifts, specific amounts. I needed to come in immediately to discuss my employment. I stared at the phone after he hung up. The coffee shop was 20 minutes away. The art school dean would be in his office in 30 minutes. I couldn't be in both places. I chose the school. The coffee shop job was just money. The art school was everything I'd worked for. By the time I called back to explain, it was too late. He'd already decided. 3 years of perfect attendance, stellar reviews, customer compliments, none of it mattered against an anonymous complaint. Don't bother coming in for your last check, he said. They'd mail it. I sat on my bed, still in yesterday's clothes, watching through my window as Isabella hugged our parents in the kitchen below. She'd changed into a soft pink sweater, her hair in a messy bun, the grieving sister, seeking comfort from her family. My phone lit up with an Instagram notification. Isabella had posted a story. I clicked it before I could stop myself. A selfie with our parents, coffee cups raised. The caption read, "Healing begins with truth." In the background, barely visible on the kitchen counter, lay a familiar piece of fabric, the Diane von Furstenberg dress, the one I'd paid for with 3 weeks of double shifts. The dean's office called while I was still staring at the photo. The evidence against me was comprehensive. Videos compiled from my Instagram stories, showing me working on pieces. Audio spliced in from somewhere else. Me talking about taking inspiration from established artists. The timestamps showed these videos predated my portfolio submission by months, but I recognized my own voice in the audio. Conversations with Isabella from from years ago, recorded without my knowledge. Talks about my art process, taken completely out of context. She'd been collecting evidence for years. My best friend Mia texted next. Isabella had reached out to her boyfriend with concerns about my mental health. Screenshots of messages I'd supposedly sent, talking about dark thoughts. Mia wanted to know if I was okay, but there was distance in her words. Doubt. I threw on clothes and ordered an Uber to campus. 20 minutes in traffic, refreshing my email, watching my future disappear in real time. The driver kept glancing at me in the mirror as I muttered to myself, trying to piece together how many ways Isabella had accessed my life. The art building looked different somehow, smaller, like it was already rejecting me. I ran up 3 flights to Professor Martinez's office. He usually kept my physical portfolio there, said he liked showing it to other faculty. The office door was open. Professor Martinez sat at his desk. My portfolio spread before him. Several pages were missing. The ones that most clearly showed my artistic development, my unique style evolution. He looked up when I entered, his expression unreadable. The security footage from last night had corrupted, he said. But the janitor mentioned seeing someone. A nice blonde lady who said she was my sister. Picking up something I'd left behind. My phone buzzed. Isabella again. This time about my gas station job. She'd already reached out to that manager too, sharing her concerns about my confession at Thanksgiving, about my history of financial irresponsibility. I sank into the chair across from Professor Martinez. 3 years of work, scattered across his desk with gaping holes. The remaining pieces looked disconnected. Amateur without the context of the missing pages. My roommate texted while I sat there. She'd gotten emails about my theft history. Anonymous, but detailed. She wanted to talk about our living situation. The trust was gone, she said. Could I start looking for somewhere else? I opened my password manager app on my phone, desperate for any access to my accounts. The last login showed Isabella's device. 3 days ago. How? Then I remembered. That night in 2019, after she'd borrowed my phone, she'd been so insistent about helping me organize my passwords, said I needed better security. I'd given her my master password for emergencies. My phone screen went black again. This time it stayed dark for 30 seconds before coming back. A reminder that Isabella could watch everything I did. The gas station manager called while I was still in Professor Martinez's office. Isabella had visited in person, he said, as a concerned sister. She'd brought printouts of my confession at dinner. He appreciated her looking out for me, but he couldn't have someone with admitted theft history handling cash. 2 jobs gone in 1 morning. My savings would last maybe 2 months if I was careful. Less if I had to find a new apartment. I walked back outside, squinting in the morning sun. My Uber driver had long since left. I'd have to take the bus home. While waiting at the stop, I noticed something in my email. A legal document, filed 2 days before Thanksgiving. Isabella petitioning to become my financial guardian, citing a pattern of irresponsible behavior requiring intervention. 2 days before Thanksgiving, before I'd said anything about the dress. She'd been planning this. The bus ride home took 40 minutes. I spent it piecing together the timeline. Every borrowed phone, every helpful security fix, every recorded conversation. Years of preparation for this moment. When I got home, Isabella's car was gone, but the damage was done. Mom barely looked at me when I walked in. Dad muttered something about disappointment and went to his study. I climbed the stairs to my room, each step heavier than the last. My laptop sat open on my desk. Google still denying me access. My phone buzzed with another text. The roommate again. She wanted me out by the end of the week. I stared at my reflection in the black phone screen. 3 years ago, I'd been the girl who took the fall to protect her sister. Now I was the girl who'd lost everything because I'd finally told the truth. The irony wasn't lost on me. Isabella had taught me about financial responsibility after all. She'd shown me the cost of trust, the price of family loyalty. The lesson had just taken 3 years to complete. My phone buzzed one more time. An email from the art school. They'd be conducting a formal review, but I should proceed under the assumption that my acceptance was void. They took academic integrity very seriously. I sat on my bed, in the same spot where Isabella had cried 3 years ago. No tears came. Just a hollow understanding that this was only the beginning. Isabella had had 3 years to plan. I'd had one dinner to tell the truth. The score was already decided. I packed what I could fit in 2 suitcases while my parents stayed downstairs, pretending I didn't exist. The eviction notice from my roommate meant I had nowhere to go except back to this house where I was now unwelcome. My hands moved mechanically folding clothes while my mind raced through Isabella's systematic destruction of my life. The doorbell rang. Through my window, I watched a process server hand Dad papers. His face went pale as he read them. Within minutes, both parents were at my door. Mom held the restraining order petition, her hands shaking. Isabella had filed it that morning, citing my escalating harassment and the threatening confrontation at Thanksgiving. Dad's voice was cold as he explained I couldn't stay here if Isabella felt unsafe visiting. They'd already consulted their lawyer. I had 24 hours to find somewhere else, or they'd have to formally evict me to comply with the potential order. I called Aunt Martha, swallowing my pride. She listened to my explanation, then sighed. She had a spare room, but only if I admitted my mistakes and agreed to therapy for my jealousy issues. Isabella had already called her, crying about my obsession with her success. My phone buzzed. The gas station manager had reconsidered and would give me one last shift tonight to collect my things and final paycheck. I accepted, desperate for any income. That evening, I worked my final shift in a haze. Regular customers avoided eye contact. Word had spread about my theft confession at Thanksgiving. Isabella's version of events had already become the truth in everyone's minds. During my break, I discovered Isabella's latest move. She posted in our neighborhood Facebook group about feeling unsafe after my public attack. The comments were brutal. People I'd known for years called me unstable, suggested I needed help, praised Isabella for her strength in speaking out. My phone screen flickered black again. When it came back, my Instagram account was logged out. The password had been changed. My digital art portfolio, years of work, locked away. Isabella was erasing me piece by piece. Back at my parents' house after midnight, I found my belongings already packed in boxes by the front door. A note from Mom said they'd paid for a week at a motel nearby. Until you figure things out, she'd written. No signature. The motel room smelled like cigarettes and disappointment. I sat on the thin mattress, laptop open, trying to access any of my accounts. Everything was locked. But then I remembered something. My old tablet, the one I'd used freshman year before upgrading. It might still be logged into my cloud storage from before Isabella's security help. I drove to the storage unit where I'd kept my college things. My hands fumbled with the lock in the dark. Inside, buried under art supplies, I found the tablet. Dead battery. I sat in my car, charging it from the cigarette lighter, praying. It powered on. Still logged in. My heart raced as I accessed my cloud storage, downloading everything I could before Isabella noticed the security gap. Portfolio pieces, photos, documents, all transferring to a USB drive I'd bought at a gas station. My phone rang. Liam McMahon, a name I didn't recognize. He identified himself as a former intern at Isabella's company, fired 6 months ago for misusing company funds. He'd seen my Facebook post about the Thanksgiving incident. He had information about Isabella but needed to meet in person. The next morning, I met Marcus at a diner 2 towns over. He looked exhausted, working 3 jobs since Isabella had destroyed his career. He showed me emails, receipts, documentation. Isabella had charged personal shopping to the company card, then blamed him when accounting noticed. She'd convinced everyone he was a thief, got him fired, destroyed his references. Marcus had kept everything, hoping someday to clear his name. The receipts showed Isabella's shopping patterns, her signatures, but his NDA prevented him from using them in any legal proceeding. He could share them with me, but I couldn't use them in court. I recorded our conversation on my phone, using the same tactics Isabella had taught me. Marcus described how Isabella had manipulated their boss, played the victim, cried in meetings about feeling targeted by the intern who discovered her theft. After Marcus left, I sat in my car, processing. Isabella had done this before. I wasn't special. I was just her latest victim. My phone buzzed. A text from Sarah, Isabella's roommate, sent at 2 a.m. She was hammered, feeling guilty. Isabella laughed about the goth phase financial education she'd given me, but there was more. Sarah mentioned someone named Emma, another girl Isabella had taught a lesson in college. Sarah's next text came came immediately after. Isabella had seen the messages. Sarah was retracting everything, said I was harassing her. The text ended with, "She made me send this." I drove to the courthouse to file my response to the restraining order. The clerk looked at me with pity as I submitted my handwritten statement. I couldn't afford a lawyer. Isabella had retained one of the city's best firms. Outside the courthouse, I googled Emma Patterson, Isabella's college roommate. Found her on LinkedIn, working as a teacher 3 states away. Her Facebook was locked down, but I found an old college newspaper article. Emma had been expelled for academic dishonesty junior year, lost her scholarship, never graduated. The details were vague, but the timing lined up with when Isabella had needed a single room. I messaged Emma through LinkedIn, explaining who I was. Her response came within an hour. She couldn't help. Isabella had destroyed her college dreams. She'd rebuilt her life and couldn't go through that again. But she confirmed what I suspected. Isabella had planted evidence, made false reports, destroyed Emma's future over a petty roommate dispute. The restraining order hearing was in 3 days. I spent them living in my car, showering at the gym, applying for jobs on coffee shop Wi-Fi. Every application asked about criminal history. I had none yet, but Isabella was working on that. My former art professor Martinez texted asking to meet. He'd found my sketches from 2018 in his office, proving my portfolio's originality. But when Isabella learned he was helping me, she'd visited his office. The security footage from her visit was mysteriously corrupted. But afterwards, Martinez requested an immediate transfer to another campus. He gave me the sketches and an audio recording of Isabella threatening his career if he wrote me a recommendation letter. The evidence was piling up, but none of it was admissible. Everything I'd gathered required breaking rules Isabella could cite as harassment. She'd planned for this, counted on my desperation making me reckless. At the restraining order hearing, Isabella arrived looking fragile in a conservative suit. She'd brought character witnesses from work, printouts of my threatening social media posts, documentation of my break-in to retrieve my tablet from storage. She cried as she described living in fear since Thanksgiving. I represented myself, voice shaking as I tried to explain the systematic destruction of my life. The judge looked skeptical. Where was my evidence? Why hadn't I reported this alleged harassment earlier? Did I have any witnesses? Isabella's lawyer presented their final evidence. Security footage from her office building showing me waiting outside looking aggressive. What the footage didn't show was that I'd been there for a job interview at a different company in the same building, but context didn't matter. The image was damning. The judge granted a temporary restraining order. I couldn't go within 500 feet of Isabella, her home, or her workplace. The building where I'd interviewed for jobs was now off limits. Another avenue closed. Walking out of the courthouse, I checked my bank balance. $300 left. The motel week was almost up. My car insurance payment was due tomorrow. Then I saw it. In my spam folder, a legal notice I'd almost missed. Isabella had filed for conservatorship, claiming I was mentally unstable and unable to manage my finances. The hearing was next week. If she won, she'd control everything I owned. I drove to the library, researching conservatorship law. That's when I found it. Buried in the filing, Isabella had mentioned something about protecting family assets. What family assets? We weren't rich. Our parents lived paycheck to paycheck. I called my cousin Jake, the lawyer who'd helped with Grandma's estate 2 years ago. He was reluctant to talk until I mentioned the conservatorship filing. There was something in Grandma's will, he said. A trust fund for the grandchild who needs it most. Accessible at age 25. $50,000. I turned 25 next month. Jake couldn't tell me more. Isabella's boss was his firm's biggest client, but he suggested I look into the will myself. Public record. At the courthouse records office, I found Grandma's will. There it was. $50,000 in trust to be distributed to the grandchild who demonstrated the greatest need at age 25. The trustee would decide. The trustee was whoever had legal guardianship or conservatorship. Isabella had known. She'd planned this for years, waiting for me to get close to 25. The credit card incident, the security help, the recorded conversations, all preparation for this moment. I sat in my car, engine off to save gas, piecing it together. Isabella needed me to look unstable, irresponsible, incapable. The Thanksgiving confession had been my mistake, giving her the opening she needed. Now she was moving fast, before I turned 25 and could access the trust myself. My phone rang. An unknown number, the art school dean. They'd completed their review. While they found no evidence of actual plagiarism, the reputational concerns surrounding my situation made my acceptance untenable. They wished me luck in my future endeavors. I drove to Isabella's apartment building, not to confront her. The restraining order prevented that, but to think, to sit where she destroyed my life and figure out my next move. That's when I saw Marcus's car in visitor parking. He was here, at Isabella's building. As I watched, he entered using a key code. Not visiting Isabella. She didn't know what he looked like. He was visiting someone else. I texted him. He responded immediately. He was dating a girl in 4B, had been for months learning the building's rhythms. He knew things, Isabella's patterns, her weaknesses. We met at a park outside the restraining order radius. Marcus had been watching, waiting for his chance at justice. He'd seen Isabella bring home boxes of files, work she wasn't supposed to take from the office. He'd photographed her using the company car for personal errands. Small violations, but they added up. More importantly, he'd kept in touch with other former employees. 3 others had similar stories. Isabella's pattern of workplace manipulation went back years, but everyone was too scared to speak up. She destroyed their careers, their reputations. I made a decision. If I was going down, I'd document everything. Not for court. That ship had sailed, but for the truth. I started a blog, anonymous but detailed. Every piece of evidence, every connection, every pattern. Marcus contributed his files. The others slowly began sharing their stories. Isabella found the blog within days. Her lawyer sent cease and desist letters to the hosting company, but I'd learned from her. Multiple backups, mirror sites, everything archived. The truth was harder to erase than she'd expected. The conservatorship hearing arrived. Isabella came prepared with documentation of my mental instability, the job losses, the eviction, the restraining order, the art school rejection. On paper, I looked exactly as unstable as she'd painted me, but I'd prepared too. I requested a psychiatric evaluation from a court-approved doctor. It would take 3 days, delaying the hearing. Isabella's lawyer argued against it, but the judge agreed. If I was truly unstable, an evaluation would prove it. Those 3 days in psychiatric evaluation were surreal. I told the truth, all of it. The doctor listened, took notes, asked questions. Isabella had already called the facility, expressing concern for my well-being, but the doctor saw through it. The evaluation cleared me of any mental illness beyond acute stress reaction to family conflict. It wasn't enough to stop the conservatorship, but it bought me time. The judge scheduled another hearing in 2 weeks to review all evidence. I used those 2 weeks strategically. Found Emma through a teaching forum. She wouldn't testify, but she wrote a letter describing Isabella's pattern. Connected with 2 of Isabella's former coworkers who'd been bullied into quitting. They wouldn't testify either, but their written statements showed consistency. The blog grew. Others found it, shared their own stories about workplace bullies, family manipulation, financial abuse. Isabella tried to get it taken down repeatedly, but I'd learned her own tactics. Stay just within legal bounds. Document everything. Let the truth speak for itself. 5 days before the conservatorship hearing, Isabella made a mistake. She posted on Instagram about supporting family through mental health struggles, wearing the Diane von Furstenberg dress, the same dress from her Thanksgiving post. Marcus screenshot it before she could delete it. I'd been living in my car for 2 weeks, showering at the gym, working temporary jobs through apps. Rock bottom felt like freedom. Isabella had taken everything she could. There was nothing left to lose. The night before the hearing, I parked outside the storage unit reviewing my evidence. Inadmissible in court, but it painted a picture. Isabella's pattern of destruction, documented across years and victims. The trust fund motive, the calculated timing. My phone buzzed. Mom, finally reaching out. She'd seen the blog, read the stories, started recognizing the pattern she'd been blind to for years. She was sorry, but what could she do now? The lawyers were involved. The damage was done. I told her about the trust fund, the $50,000 Isabella was trying to steal. Mom went silent. She hadn't known. Dad hadn't known. Isabella had kept that secret, planning her final move. The conservatorship hearing hearing would decide everything. If Isabella won, she'd control my finances, my future, my life. The trust fund would be hers to manage for my benefit. If I won, I'd still be jobless, homeless, reputation destroyed, but free. I spent that last night in my car writing, not for the blog, but for myself, documenting every moment, every decision, every consequence. Win or lose tomorrow, I wanted a record of the truth. As dawn broke over the parking lot, I prepared for court, showered at the gym one last time, put on my only clean outfit, gathered my inadmissible evidence, my psychiatric evaluation, my written statements from Isabella's other victims. The hearing was at 9. Isabella would arrive polished, prepared, protected by expensive lawyers. I would arrive alone, armed only with the truth she'd spent years teaching me to document. The score was already decided, I'd thought weeks ago, but I'd been wrong. The game was still in play, and Isabella had taught me well. Financial responsibility, document everything, protect your assets. She just hadn't expected me to learn so thoroughly. I drove toward the courthouse as the sun climbed higher, my USB drive of evidence in one pocket, Marcus's recordings in another. 3 years of preparation on her side, 3 weeks of desperate documentation on mine. The final lesson was about to begin. The courthouse parking lot was already full when I arrived. I circled 3 times before finding a spot near the back. My hands left sweat marks on the steering wheel as I gathered my folders of evidence. Through the glass doors, I spotted Isabella's lawyer setting up at the plaintiff's table. No sign of Isabella yet. The security line moved slowly. I watched the clock tick past 8:45. The guard examined my USB drive suspiciously before waving me through. The metal detector beeped at Marcus's recordings in my pocket, but they let me keep them after inspection. Isabella entered the courtroom at 8:55, wearing a navy suit that probably cost more than my car. She'd brought 3 character witnesses from her company. Her lawyer had a stack of documents thick enough to use as a doorstop. I sat alone at the defendant's table with my single folder and court-appointed advocate who'd met me 10 minutes ago. The judge entered precisely at 9. Judge Catherine Chen, according to the nameplate. She reviewed the conservatorship petition while I studied Isabella's witnesses, her boss, her HR director, and someone I didn't recognize, all dressed like they'd stepped out of a corporate catalog. Isabella's lawyer began with my pattern of instability, the job losses, the eviction, the restraining order, the art school rejection, each point supported by documentation. My advocate objected twice, both times overruled. When they presented the psychiatric evaluation, Isabella's lawyer spun it expertly. Acute stress reaction became evidence of my inability to handle adult responsibilities. The doctor's notes about family conflict became proof I couldn't maintain relationships. Even my clarity during the evaluation became concerning detachment from reality. Isabella took the stand next. She dabbed at her eyes with a tissue as she described finding me in her apartment. Her voice trembled when she talked about living in fear since Thanksgiving. She mentioned our grandmother's trust fund as an afterthought, something she'd only recently discovered while reviewing family documents out of concern for my future. The judge asked about the timeline. Isabella explained she'd filed the conservatorship petition before Thanksgiving because she'd been worried about my spending patterns for months. The way she told it, my confession at dinner had confirmed her worst fears about my financial irresponsibility. My advocate cross-examined weekly. Isabella had answers for everything. Yes, she'd helped me with my passwords in 2019, but only because I'd asked. No, she'd never accessed my accounts without permission. The remote access app? She didn't know anything about that. Perhaps I'd installed it myself and forgotten. During the lunch recess, I sat in my car reviewing my evidence. Marcus had texted offering to testify, but we both knew his NDA made that impossible. Emma Patterson had sent another message reiterating she couldn't get involved. Even Professor Martinez had gone silent after his transfer. The afternoon session focused on my current circumstances. Living in my car, no steady employment, bank account nearly empty. Isabella's lawyer painted a picture of someone spiraling toward complete destruction without intervention. Then came the witnesses. Isabella's boss testified about her exemplary character and concern for family. The HR director confirmed Isabella had reported worries about me months ago. The third witness turned out to be a therapist Isabella had consulted about helping a family member in crisis. My turn came at 3 p.m. My advocate had advised me to keep my answers short and factual. I tried explaining about the 2019 incident, but without the receipts I'd shown at Thanksgiving, it sounded like deflection. I mentioned Liam McMahon, but couldn't provide his testimony. I brought up Emma Patterson, but had only her refusal to help. The judge asked about my evidence folder. I explained about the blog, the patterns I'd documented, the other victims who'd come forward. Isabella's lawyer objected to unsubstantiated internet rumors. The judge agreed. Nothing from the blog could be considered. I pulled out the USB drive, the edited Instagram videos, the timestamp analysis I'd done myself. The judge reviewed them briefly before Isabella's lawyer pointed out I had no technical expertise to validate my claims. Without an expert witness, my analysis meant nothing. The audio recording from Professor Martinez came next. Isabella threatening his career if he helped me. But the recording was made without Isabella's consent in a 2-party consent state. Inadmissible. My advocate hadn't even known I had it. By 4 p.m., I was drowning. Every piece of evidence I'd gathered hit a legal wall. Isabella had spent years preparing for this moment. I'd had 3 weeks of desperate scrambling. The judge called a brief recess. In the bathroom, I splashed water on my face and stared at my reflection. Dark circles under my eyes, hair I'd cut myself to save money. The same black jacket I'd worn to Thanksgiving. Now my only court-appropriate clothing. Back in the courtroom, Isabella's lawyer made their closing argument. I was a young woman in crisis, unable to manage basic life responsibilities. The job losses, homelessness, and paranoid fixation on Isabella all pointed to someone who needed help. The trust fund would provide resources for my care, with Isabella ensuring it was used responsibly. My advocate did her best. She pointed out I'd held jobs for years before recent events. My psychiatric evaluation showed no mental illness. The timing of Isabella's petition seemed suspicious, but without evidence of Isabella's manipulation, it all sounded thin. Judge Chen deliberated for 20 minutes. When she returned, her expression was neutral. She acknowledged the situation was complicated. Family conflicts often were. However, the evidence clearly showed I was in a deteriorating situation that required intervention. The conservatorship was granted for 1 year, with mandatory review after 6 months. Isabella would control my finances, including any inheritance or trust funds. I was required to maintain stable housing and employment. Weekly therapy sessions were mandated. Any violation would extend the conservatorship. Isabella's tears looked genuine as the judge delivered her decision. She approached me after, reaching out like she wanted to hug me. I stepped back, bumping into the table. She whispered something about wanting to help. My advocate guided me away. Outside the courthouse, I sat on the steps trying to process what had happened. My phone buzzed with the official order. Isabella now controlled everything. My bank accounts, my credit, any money I earned, the trust fund I'd turned 25 to access in 3 weeks. Mom called while I was still sitting there. She'd watched the proceedings from the gallery. Her voice was careful, measured. She suggested I come home, follow the court's requirements, let Isabella help me get back on my feet, the same enabling pattern that had created this mess. I drove to the storage unit one last time. Isabella would inventory my belongings soon, deciding what I could keep. I sat among my college things, my art supplies, the remnants of the life she'd systematically destroyed. The tablet I'd used to save my portfolio was here. I slipped it into my jacket. One small rebellion. That night, I parked behind a 24-hour grocery store and used their Wi-Fi to update the blog one final time. I posted the court's decision, the truth about the trust fund, the years of planning that had led to this moment. Within an hour, Isabella's lawyer had sent another cease and desist. The hosting company pulled the site, but the internet has a memory. Others had archived the posts. Screenshots circulated in forums about financial abuse and toxic families. Isabella couldn't erase everything, though she'd won everything that mattered. The next morning, I drove to Isabella's apartment building, not to violate the restraining order, but to meet Marcus one last time. He was moving away, starting fresh in another city where Isabella's influence couldn't reach. He offered to help me leave too, but I had court-mandated therapy to attend. The therapist's office was in a strip mall between a nail salon and a tax service. Dr. Catherine Roberts Roberts, according to the door. Isabella had chosen her, of course. The first session focused on my persecution complex regarding Isabella. I sat in silence for most of it, knowing anything I said would be reported back. Isabella had arranged a job for me at a call center. Minimum wage, monitored hours, direct deposit to an account she controlled. She'd also found me a room in a boarding house. Shared bathroom, no kitchen, but it satisfied the stable housing requirement. My new routine began immediately. Work at 8, therapy at 5 on Thursdays. Isabella reviewed my purchases weekly, questioning every expense. She'd allow me $50 per week for food and incidentals. The rest went toward paying down debts I'd never incurred. 3 weeks later, I turned 25. The trust fund transferred automatically to the conservatorship account. $50,000 I couldn't touch. Isabella sent a text about investing it responsibly for my future. I didn't respond. I learned that silence was my only form of resistance. Marcus emailed from his new city. He'd found a job, started rebuilding. The other victims from the blog stayed in touch privately. We couldn't help each other legally, but knowing we weren't alone meant something. At work, I became employee of the month after 2 months. The recognition came with a $100 bonus that went straight to Isabella. She texted congratulations and reminded me about financial responsibility, the same phrase that had started everything. The boarding house was full of people like me, broken by circumstances, starting over with nothing. We didn't talk much, but we understood each other. Everyone there was running from something or someone. My art supplies remained in storage. Isabella had deemed them non-essential and sold most of them. She kept the portfolio pieces as evidence of my improvement under her care. Sometimes I sketched on napkins during lunch breaks, muscle memory keeping my skills alive. The 6-month review approached. Isabella's lawyer prepared a report showing my compliance. Steady job, stable housing, attending therapy, following all requirements. The conservatorship would likely continue, possibly indefinitely. Professor Martinez sent a message through a student. He'd seen my work in a small gallery before everything happened. A curator was interested, but I couldn't create new pieces, couldn't access my old ones, couldn't even afford supplies. Another door closed by Isabella's control. Emma Patterson reached out once. She'd been where I was. It had taken her 5 years to rebuild completely. She offered advice, comply, document everything, wait for Isabella to make a mistake. They always did eventually. But I'd already seen how Isabella's mistakes didn't matter when she controlled the narrative. The call center promoted me to supervisor after 4 months. The raise meant nothing since Isabella controlled the money, but it looked good for the court review. Evidence that I was stabilizing under her guidance. Some nights I sat in my small room and did the math. At minimum wage, with Isabella controlling everything, I'd never save enough to fight the conservatorship legally. The system was designed to be inescapable once you were in it. 6 months arrived with another court date. Isabella wore the same navy suit. She presented evidence of my improvement. The judge noted my compliance and extended the conservatorship for another year. Isabella hugged me afterward. I stood rigid, arms at my sides. That night, I found a note slipped under my door at the boarding house. Sarah, Isabella's roommate. She was moving out, couldn't live with the guilt anymore. She'd saved screenshots of Isabella's messages about the game she was playing with me, but screenshots weren't enough. We both knew that. I continued the routine. Work, therapy, compliance. Isabella had won completely. The trust fund she'd wanted, control she'd craved, the narrative she'd crafted. I existed now as a supporting character in her success story, the troubled sister she'd saved. A year passed. Another review, another extension. The therapist reported I still showed resistance to accepting help. Isabella suggested increasing sessions. The judge agreed. More money for my wages diverted to treatment I didn't need. Marcus sent a wedding invitation. He'd rebuilt his life completely in another city. I couldn't attend. Travel required Isabella's approval, but seeing his success gave me something I'd lost. Proof that life existed beyond Isabella's control. The boarding house residents changed constantly, but the stories remained the same. People trapped by systems designed to help but twisted to control. We were all living proof that sometimes the truth didn't matter if you couldn't afford to prove it. 2 years in, Isabella made her first real mistake. She posted on Instagram about a shopping trip, wearing designer clothes while I wore thrift store finds. Someone who'd followed the blog recognized her and commented about the trust fund. She deleted it quickly, but screenshots spread. The court didn't care. Social media drama wasn't evidence of financial mismanagement. Isabella's lawyer spun it as her maintaining professional appearances while managing my care. The judge reminded me that gratitude would help my recovery. I learned to perform compliance while maintaining inner resistance. Smiled in therapy. Thanked Isabella for her help in court. Played the role of the rescued sister while documenting everything in hidden notes. Maybe someday they'd matter, maybe not. The call center closed after 3 years. Isabella found me another minimum wage job within days. Data entry this time. Numbers on a screen all day. She called it progress, building my resume. I called it existence without living. My 28th birthday passed without acknowledgement. The trust fund had grown under Isabella's management. She sent quarterly reports showing the balance. Money that should have funded my art career now sat in investments I couldn't touch. Some of the blog followers still reached out occasionally. They'd started their own forums about conservatorship abuse. My story had become a cautionary tale, how preparation and manipulation could twist family bonds into legal chains. Isabella got engaged to a senior partner at her firm. She asked me to be a bridesmaid. The therapist said refusing would show I hadn't processed my resentment. I stood at her wedding in a dress she chose, smiling for photos that would show our healed relationship. The reception was at the same hotel where our parents had thrown her internship party years ago. Full circle. Isabella gave a speech about family, forgiveness, and growth. The guests applauded. I clapped too. The sound hollow in my ears. After 4 years, the judge suggested reducing oversight, not ending the conservatorship, just loosening restrictions. Isabella agreed magnanimously. I could have my own bank account with a $500 limit, small freedoms that felt like mockery. I started saving those small amounts, $20 here, $30 there, hidden cash in places Isabella wouldn't think to look. Not enough to fight legally, but enough to imagine escape. The boarding house manager, who'd seen too many stories like mine, pretended not to notice. 5 years in, Isabella had her first child. She named her Grace, after me, a twisted honor that made my stomach turn. She brought the baby to court reviews, talking about wanting to be a good example for her daughter. The judge praised her dedication to family. The real Grace, me, continued existing in the margins of Isabella's life. Working jobs she approved, living where she allowed, spending money she monitored. The perfect example of someone who needed conservatorship, because the system had made me need it. Some nights I dreamed about the art career I'd lost, the portfolio pieces Isabella had sold or stored, the acceptance letter that had been withdrawn, the life I'd been building before that Thanksgiving dinner. But dreams were all I had left, and even those felt monitored. The therapist retired after 6 years. Isabella chose her replacement, another professional who saw what they were paid to see. I'd learned the rhythm by then. Nod, agree, express gratitude, perform recovery while dying inside. Marcus sent updates occasionally. He'd had 2 kids, started his own business, living proof that Isabella's victims could recover if they escaped her orbit completely. But the conservatorship kept me locked in place, a satellite forever circling her success. 7 years passed. The trust fund had doubled under Isabella's management. She'd used some for her own benefit. Administrative fees, management costs, emergency loans that never required repayment, all legal under conservatorship law, all documented in reports the court never questioned. I turned 32 in the same boarding house room, the same minimum wage existence, the same mandated therapy, the same controlled life. Isabella had won so completely that fighting seemed pointless. She'd taken my 20s, my dreams, my autonomy, all for money I'd never known existed. The blog about our story had become academic fodder. Law students studied it as an example of conservatorship abuse. Psychologists analyzed the family dynamics, but I remained trapped in the case study, living the cautionary tale in real time. Isabella's second child arrived, another daughter. She posted about teaching them financial responsibility, the importance of family support. The comments praised her wisdom. No one remembered the blog anymore. The truth had been buried under years of Isabella's careful narrative. 8 years in, I stopped hoping for change, accepted that this was my life now. Work, therapy, compliance. Isabella had built a prison of legal documents and court orders. The trust fund she'd she'd stolen through law rather than force, the life she'd taken through systems meant to protect. But I kept documenting every interaction, every financial report, every therapy session, boxes of notes hidden in the boarding house basement, not because I believed they'd matter, but because documenting had become my only form of agency. Isabella had taught me that lesson too well to stop. The other victims from the blog had mostly moved on. New cities, new lives, new names sometimes, but I remained, the one who'd fought back and lost everything for it. The example of what happened when you told the truth in a system that rewarded manipulation. My phone buzzed one evening, an unknown number, Emma Patterson, after all these years. She'd become a lawyer, specialized in conservatorship law. She'd been following my case. She couldn't promise anything, but she wanted to help, pro bono, because she'd been where I was. I met her at a coffee shop near the boarding house. She looked different, confident, successful. Everything Isabella had tried to steal from her, she'd rebuilt. She reviewed my documentation, took notes, asked careful questions. For the first time in 8 years, someone believed me without payment or mandate. Emma filed a motion challenging the conservatorship's duration. 8 years exceeded any reasonable intervention period. She argued that continued control constituted abuse, not support. Isabella's lawyer responded with familiar arguments about ongoing need for supervision. The hearing was set for my 33rd birthday. 9 years after that Thanksgiving dinner. 9 years of Isabella's control. 9 years of existing instead of living. Emma prepared meticulously, but we both knew the odds. The system protected itself. Isabella arrived at court in another expensive suit. She'd aged well, success agreeing with her. I wore clothes from the thrift store, looking exactly like someone who'd been ground down by 9 years of controlled poverty. The optics alone supported her case, but Emma had found something in the financial reports. Small discrepancies, administrative fees that didn't match standard rates, loans that coincided with Isabella's major purchases, not enough for criminal charges, but enough to raise questions about fiduciary responsibility. The judge listened differently this time. 9 years was excessive for any conservatorship without severe mental illness. The financial questions created doubt. Isabella's lawyer argued procedural issues, but the seed was planted. The review was extended for fuller investigation. 3 months of additional hearings followed. Isabella's financial management scrutinized. My compliance documented. The trust fund's original purpose examined. Grandma had wanted to help whoever needed it most. Isabella had made sure I needed it, then taken it. The final hearing came in December, 9 years and 1 month after Thanksgiving. The judge terminated the conservatorship. No admission of wrongdoing, no compensation for lost years, just freedom to control my own life again. The trust fund remained depleted by administrative costs. Isabella kept what she'd taken. I walked out of the courthouse into winter air that felt different. Free air. Emma hugged me, then handed me a business card for a victim advocacy group, resources for rebuilding, support groups, job training programs, the long road back to something resembling life. Isabella waited by her car in the parking lot. We stood 10 feet apart. The restraining order long expired, but the distance permanent. She said something about hoping I'd do well. I didn't respond. There was nothing left to say. She'd won the money. I'd won my freedom. We'd both lost everything that mattered. I returned to the boarding house one last time, packed my few belongings, retrieved my hidden documentation, said goodbye to the manager who'd shown small kindnesses. The room would be filled within days by someone else escaping or trapped. The victim advocacy group helped me find transitional housing, a real apartment, small, basic, but mine. I could lock the door, choose my food, spend money without approval. Freedoms that felt foreign after 9 years. I found work at a nonprofit helping conservatorship abuse victims. Minimum wage still, but meaningful now. My documentation helped build cases for others. My experience became expertise. Isabella had created her perfect victim, but victims could become advocates. 6 months after freedom, I received a package. My old portfolio pieces. Professor Martinez had saved them before his transfer, kept them safe for 9 years. Water damaged, aged, but mine. I spread them on my apartment floor and cried for the first time since the conservatorship started. I began creating art again. Supplies bought with my own money, time carved from my own schedule. The skills had atrophied but not died. My new work was darker, informed by loss, but still mine. Isabella couldn't take that. A gallery show happened 1 year post-freedom. Small venue, modest sales, but my name on the wall, my work in frames, my story told through images instead of legal documents. Some pieces sold to people who'd followed the blog years ago. Full circle, but different. Mom reached out after seeing the show announcement. She wanted to reconcile, to explain, to find peace. I didn't respond. Some bridges burned too completely to rebuild. She'd chosen Isabella's narrative over my truth. That choice had consequences. Isabella's life continued successfully. Promoted to partner. Perfect family, beautiful home. The trust fund had helped build her dream life. Sometimes I wondered if she thought about the cost. Probably not. Predators rarely do. But I was building too, slowly. One minimum wage paycheck at a time. One art piece at a time. One day of freedom at a time. She'd taken my 20s and early 30s. The rest was mine to salvage. The blog returned, reposted by academics studying financial abuse. New victims found it, reached out, shared their stories. We formed networks of survival. Isabella had taught me documentation. Now I taught others. Her weapons became our tools. 2 years post-freedom, I met someone at a survivor support group. Another conservatorship escapee. We understood each other's triggers. The panic at financial questions. The hoarding of documents. The need for control after years without it. Trauma bonding, but also genuine connection. We moved in together after a year. Shared expenses. Shared documentation habits. Shared understanding that family could be the deepest threat. We built carefully, knowing how easily trust could be weaponized. Isabella had taught us both that lesson. My art evolved, from processing trauma to exploring recovery. Critics called it raw, honest, uncomfortable. It sold enough to supplement my nonprofit salary. Not the career I'd planned at 22, but the one I'd earned through survival. Isabella sent a message on my 35th birthday. Something about putting the past behind us, being sisters again. Her daughters would love to meet their aunt. I blocked the number. Some relationships couldn't be salvaged, only survived. The conservatorship had ended 3 years ago, but its effects remained. Credit destroyed, career derailed, relationships severed, dreams deferred. But I was free, building, creating, living on my own terms. Isabella had won the game she'd played, but games end. Life continues. I kept working at the nonprofit, promoted to case manager, then program coordinator. My salary finally exceeded minimum wage after years of climbing back. The American dream, delayed and diminished but not dead. My partner and I married at City Hall. No family invited. Our chosen witnesses were other survivors. We celebrated at the coffee shop where I'd first met Emma Patterson. Small joy, but genuine. Isabella couldn't touch it. The trust fund was gone, spent on Isabella's life and legal fees. But I'd learned money wasn't the only inheritance. Grandma had also left stubbornness, resilience, the ability to document everything. Gifts Isabella couldn't steal. 5 years post-freedom, I ran into Sarah at a grocery store. Isabella's former roommate looked haunted. She apologized again for not helping more. I told her I understood. We were all just trying to survive Isabella's orbit. Some escaped, some didn't. My art started selling to collectors who appreciated survival stories. Not famous, not rich, but sustainable. I could afford supplies, pay rent, save small amounts, build the life Isabella had tried to prevent. Slower than planned, but mine. The nonprofit expanded. We helped dozens escape conservatorship abuse. Some cases like mine, family using systems meant to protect. Others different but equally trapped. Each victory small but meaningful. Isabella had created an advocate through her abuse. I thought about her sometimes. What kind of person planned for years to destroy their sister? What did she tell her daughters about their missing aunt? Did she ever feel guilt, or had success justified everything? Questions without answers, because predators rarely self-reflect. My story became a teaching tool. Law schools invited me to speak about conservatorship reform. I showed my documentation, explained the tactics, warned about family predators hiding behind concern. Some students took notes, others looked uncomfortable, recognizing dynamics in their own families. 7 years post-freedom, I achieved something Isabella couldn't steal. Peace, not forgiveness, not forgetting. but acceptance that some people choose destruction. I'd survived her worst, built from nothing, created beauty from pain. That was my victory. The boarding house where I'd lived closed down, gentrification claiming another refuge. I helped relocate residents, recognizing myself in their controlled poverty, some escaping conservatorships, others different traps, all needing what I'd needed, someone who believed them. My partner and I bought a small house. Nothing fancy, needed work, but ours. The mortgage approval felt surreal after years of financial control. We painted the walls colors Isabella would have called wasteful, filled rooms with art she would have deemed non-essential, made a home she couldn't touch. 10 years after that Thanksgiving dinner, I finally felt like myself again. Changed, scarred, but mine. Isabella had stolen a decade, but not my life. The girl who'd taken the fall in 2019 was gone. The woman who'd survived remained. I still documented everything. Old habits dying hard, file boxes of receipts, recordings of important conversations, screenshots saved in triplicate. Isabella had taught me vigilance. Now it protected me instead of serving her. The final irony came in a letter from a lawyer. Grandma's estate had one more asset, a painting she'd done, stored in a cousin's attic, worth little monetarily, but left specifically to me, not the grandchild who needs it most. To Grace, by name. Isabella couldn't touch it. I hung Grandma's painting in my home office. Abstract swirls of color that reminded me of my own work. A connection Isabella couldn't sever. An inheritance beyond money. Proof that some things survived even the most calculated destruction. My life at 35 looked nothing like I'd imagined at 22. No prestigious art career, no traditional success, but I had freedom, love, purpose. Things Isabella couldn't quantify or control. She'd won her game, but I'd won my life back. Sometimes young artists reached out, having found my work online. They saw the gap in my resume, the lost years. I told them the truth, that sometimes family was the biggest threat, that success wasn't always linear, that survival was its own art form. Isabella remained in my past, a lesson learned through pain, a reminder that trust required verification, a ghost that haunted family gatherings I no longer attended. She'd shaped me through destruction, but I'd chosen what to build from the wreckage.